Okay, so etiquette. Looks like about everyone here was required to come here. No one likes to come late at night. But thank you both, I guess, Karen Christensen's class or Melanie Steinley's class. And for those of you who came for extra credit or just to come, I appreciate it as well. Because usually if you say etiquette, what pops into your head? Just call out.
Forks and spoons.
Forks and spoons, yep. Meal etiquette, okay, great. What else you got? Pardon?
Formality.
Formality, thank you. Yeah, stuffy, okay. What else have we got?
Wealthy connotation.
Pardon?
Wealthy.
Wealthy, yeah, class separations, excellent. What else? Come on, ladies and gentlemen, you're at college, okay. Yes.
Invitations and notes and
Yeah.
back and
Thank you. Communications, invitations, how we interact. Yeah, it's interesting because when I say etiquette, almost every time when I've done this presentation, and I've been teaching the class for 14 semesters. I taught for 6 semesters and then had a break for 3 years when my husband and I had an assignment in Sweden, came back and began teaching again. And most everyone associates it with meal etiquette. Out of the semester-long class that I'm teaching, that's only one of the 14 different weeks of classes. So you hit on one of them, the art of communication, excellent. So what are we talking about for all semester? Well, it's a little bit more than that. Actually, when etiquette first came into being, it was to facilitate relationships. Then in Victorian period, it kind of got co-opted as kind of being a class system stratifier, such that even people, when they immigrated to the United States at the turn of the 20th century, came in and they would walk through this big black pot, and they would be from their country, walk through the pot, and then come out Americanized. And to do that, you had to learn different manners that made you better. Now, where did manners come from and why are they important? Well, doing a little history and understanding, most of the people that we associate with manners or who know or wrote the book were journalists. So what gave them the possibility to understand what etiquette was about? My husband was the youngest ambassador to serve since Thomas Jefferson, and we were sent to Sweden. He was 36 at the time, and I was 7.5, 8 years younger than him. So I was 28. It was pretty scary stuff because both of us, he literally grew up in a house that had a dirt floor and outdoor plumbing until he was 7 years old. I grew up in a pretty middle-class household where we had, hot dog, potato casserole, normal. And then we were thrown into these extraordinary circumstances because of his work. Such that even what happened is, anybody know Shirley Temple Black? How about Shirley Temple? Okay, so Shirley Temple Black is her whole name. She actually, after she was a dancing and singing child star, she became an ambassador for the United States for 3 different times. And so she would teach this week-long seminar at the State Department, and it was called the Ambassadorial Seminar, to teach you all of the rules and everything that you had to do so you wouldn't basically embarrass the United States, okay? So this whole week of intense training, and they send us off to Sweden, and I'm 28 years old and terrified. How am I going to remember all these rules, right? Well, my husband was given a very specific task, and his task was to restore the relationships between the United States and Sweden. And you say, well, what does that look like? Well, what had happened is during the 1970s, the U.S. Participated in the war, the Vietnam War. You all were still in heaven for decades, okay? And their Prime Minister, Olof Palme, marched in protest against the United States' involvement in that war. And you don't do that. Now, you can march in protest, but not when you have those high-level, high-profile positions. It was so serious that at the time, we literally withdrew our ambassador. That's what we do with countries like North Korea and Cuba. Okay, so pretty serious stuff. So as those political ties were broken, the educational, the cultural relationships, business relationships continued, but they weren't having those high-level political talks. So then President Reagan tasked my husband with restoring those relationships. And what did it look like, and did it matter? Is etiquette important? Let me show you a little clip and tell me what you think about it.
Just a side note, as you're pulling that up, When you go as an ambassador, do you practice the etiquette of the country you visit or the etiquette of the United States?
You're representing the United States, so you practice the etiquette of the United States. When we went the second time, my husband was called to be the mission president.
What do table manners have to do with scoring a job?
So, in answer to your question,
What do table manners have to do with score?
when we went the second time, we were there as guests of the country. We weren't representing the United States. We were there to understand the country and its culture better. It didn't mean that we did things when we went out to Swedish events. We participated in their culture and rules. But basically, it was more about promoting the United States. Okay? Great question.
A job? A lot. With the job market so tight these days, it's not enough to have a stellar resume. Companies seem to want workers with manners too. If you think about it, business is the largest social environment in the world, and etiquette classes are booming.
It's 4 steps. Let me show you. 1, 2, quietly, 3.
What does this
Okay, so
have to do
I leaned over a little bit. Is that okay?
You can tilt.
Okay.
with getting a job?
Okay, that's a big bite, Sarah.
Would you believe etiquette counts for a lot?
85% of success in life in getting a job is people skills. 15% is technical skills, or what you know.
So how do you improve your people skills? By taking a class.
Welcome to Outclass the Competition, Business Etiquette.
In just a year, Patricia Fitzpatrick says her business has doubled, and she charges $200 per person for a 2-hour group session.
1, 2, 3 shakes is okay, 4 is getting strange, and 5 is creepy.
Other etiquette classes are going gangbusters.
Go ahead.
And the students are younger, 20-somethings just out of school, looking for a job and an edge.
I want to be the person that they're like, this girl is great. When she came in, she smiled, she was confident, she shook my hand well. I want to be that person.
Which is why these young women are learning how to properly dine, communicate, and network. All the little things that can show a potential employer you're up for the job.
First of all, you don't go to events to eat. Okay? You're not there to eat. So eat something before you go.
Make eye contact in the area Fitzpatrick calls the triangle. Anything lower is too personal. Once you get the job, know how to eat. There's always a business lunch. Number 1 rule, eat with the backside of your fork. Cross your utensils while you rest and leave them parallel at 10:20, like a clock, when you're done. So many details. Does it really matter? Anna Post is the great-great-granddaughter of Emily Post, the woman who literally wrote the book on etiquette.
This will put you apart from the crowd. There are so many qualified resumes. This is a way to show that the boss can send you out and have absolute confidence that you won't embarrass them in front of the client. Bottom line.
Some other rules you should know: don't saw your food. Begin an email with "Dear," just like a business letter. And above all, if you're going on an interview, be on time. Write a thank you note afterwards, not an email. And dress appropriately. Not your idea of appropriate, but theirs. As the saying goes, you never get a second chance to make a first impression. For CNN Money, I'm Alina Cho.
Okay, so off to Sweden. All these rules to remember. Do you believe it? Do details make a difference? Yes. So you know, I love watching your faces because that video clip pretty much reinforces everything you think about etiquette. Stuffy, counting, backs of fork, right? And about 50-60% of what she shared with you I would disagree with, and I can show you a rule that's different. In fact, I have over a 3-foot-long shelf of etiquette books, and it's fascinating to me how many times they will argue for a case for one side. So back to Sweden, here we are, and I'm like, what, how do we prepare, So what happened is we started having guests in our home, and they would reciprocate. So this level guest, this level guest, this level guest, us, until we're finally where the king and queen of Sweden are coming to our home for dinner with Mrs. Reagan. Not the president yet, but Mrs. Reagan. So if you had something really big and important to do, and you wanted it to go well, what would you do?
Plan it.
Plan. Excellent. What else?
Practice.
Thank you. You practice it. That's exactly what we did. That's why you practice mock interviews, right? And so we literally practiced the entire dinner the night before, beginning to end, and brought in friends and neighbors for the dinner. And I was so grateful because I had chosen these really cool looking round flower arrangements that sat in the middle of the round tables. And they had candles coming out at really beautiful angles. And halfway through the dinner, they started to burn up the flowers. So I was like, good save, right? Good save, okay? So thought we had covered every single thing that could go wrong. So the next night, guests start arriving, and in comes like Diana Ross. She's making a comeback. You know her son Evan Ross better, okay? So there's Diana Ross, the Nordstroms, like the John W., like the twin brothers. One of them was there with his wife. Bjorn Borg, left-handed backhand in tennis, if you do that, yeah. He designs underwear now. It's really interesting, okay? What else have we got? Miss Universe at the time was from Sweden, okay? Also, President Monson and his wife. They had been friends of ours for a very long time and close ties to Sweden, so we brought them over. All the guests are coming in, getting ready, they're gathering, everything's going smooth, my heart is settled, and we invite people to go into the dining room. So they go in, and it's just like you see in the movies. The round table, sparkling candles, everything, a butler at every table with a white linen towel over his arm, and all the guests take their seats. Now, I've told you a few who are there. Who is the highest ranking woman in the room? Because she's seated on my husband's right.
Mrs. Reagan?
Pardon?
Mrs. Reagan?
Not quite, almost. She was on his left. Who's the highest ranking woman? The Queen. You just got a job at the White House Office of Protocol. Seriously, it's a real office. 18 to 27 people, depending who's in office at that point, okay? So, Queen on the right. Here's on the left is Mrs. Reagan. Who's on my right, the highest ranking gentleman in the room?
King.
Pardon?
King?
The King. Thank you. You just got a job at the White House. This is not rocket science, okay? So the King's on the right. Who's on my left? Now you wouldn't be able to guess because I actually broke protocol and had President Monson sit on my left. Little did I know, the King of Sweden loves scouting. President Monson loves scouting. Guess what I heard for 3 hours? I can tell you anything you want to know about scouting, okay? So it was great. I was grateful when all was said and done. Now, a little sidebar stop for a moment. My husband and I are both members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. We do not drink alcohol. And I can tell you with all our years in public life and in business life, we have never had anyone concerned because we didn't drink. I recall well when my husband was in China and the vice premier was seated with him, and they have these little things called Mao Tais, and they're like lethally. You could just smell the alcohol rolling off of them, And the vice premier's like, why, he asked through the translator, why is he not drinking? And all my husband had to say was religious reasons. And it's perfectly fine, no problems. Oh, okay, move on. Ladies and gentlemen, as members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, we're not that special. 1/3 of the world does not drink. Anybody know who they are? Muslims. They have a health code, not unlike ours. So we're not, if you don't make a big deal, they don't make a big deal. With that said and done, what we determined in our home, what we would do is if we were serving a dinner on behalf of the United States, we would serve wine. We chose to never serve hard liquors or alcohols. That was our choice and our distinction. If we were entertaining and had people over for family home evening, we didn't serve alcohol at all. That was kind of the way we distinguished. So Mrs. Reagan, coming from California, decides to kind of honor this dinner. She's going to send all these wonderful wines to fit with all the different courses of the dinner, and she sends them over in these crates, okay? So, back to the dinner. We have Magnus, the head butler, seated at the table, and he takes the bottle of wine and begins to serve the Queen. As he pours, out comes a mouse. Now, the Queen did nothing except turn her head. The only 3 people in that room who knew about the mouse were my husband, the Queen, and the butler. Magnus just removed the glass discreetly, went back, brought a new glass out, poured again, no mouse this time, and the dinner went on. What if she had screamed? What would have been the headlines next day? Americans trying to kill off Queen, right? I mean, seriously, okay? And then with all this work, we're back to zero again, right? Okay. Now, what's fascinating about the Queen is she was not born to royalty. The king actually had to change law, had the parliament change law so that he could marry a commoner. He had met her at the Olympics. She spoke 7 languages at that time, and he fell in love, came back, and now she speaks 8 languages, Swedish. The Swedes think she's actually in some ways more Swedish than the king is, okay? And they love her, and she loves Sweden, and she knew the importance of this dinner. And as I thought about that dinner, in relationship to that week-long seminar of rules, and the 3-foot-long shelf of rules, it occurred to me there's not a rule of what to do when a mouse comes out of the glass, right? Or a bottle. But there are principles. What's the difference between a principle and a rule?
Principle can have several applications. A rule is kind of stagnant. There's only one way to interpret it.
Yeah, a rule is more stagnant. Principle can have several applications. Yeah, a principle kind of can go across context and even cultures, right? Which fork you use, or do you use chopsticks? It depends, right? But if you consider the principles behind the rules, they can serve you well. And the overriding principle for all of etiquette is other people matter. Your job to practice good etiquette is to take care of those around you. It's not to count the soup. Seriously, people, if you were counting the soup, 1, 2, what are you thinking about? Counting, right? Can you talk to the person next to you? Can you be engaged in a conversation? Ladies and gentlemen, there's no such thing as multitasking. It's a fallacy. Neuroscience has proven that. In fact, let's do a quick little exercise. I'd like all of you who have smartphones with you, I'm actually going to ask you to take them out. Isn't that a novelty in a lecture? If you have one, if you don't worry about it. And what I'd like you to do is set your stopwatch, okay? And I want you to say out loud, under your breath, I want you to count from 10 to 0 backwards as fast as you can, and say the alphabet from A to J as fast as you can. So A, B, C, D, and 10, 9, 8, 7, 6. Got it? Numbers followed by alphabet. Ready? Go. Okay, anybody less than 4 seconds? Usually we end up 4 or 5 seconds around there, okay? Yeah, okay, fast, right? Now, I'd like you to reset your phones or your timing, and I want you to count, do the same counting and the same alphabet, but this time I want you to link the two, okay? So I want you to go 10A, 9B, okay? C8, or 8C, got it, okay? Set your timers, go again. Anybody done? Close to being done? So, what that illustrates, ladies and gentlemen, is there is no such thing as multitasking. You can do repetitive motion things, you know, like when you're folding the laundry and singing a song, or sometimes you find yourself driving and how do I get to that place, things that are kind of automatic. But when you have to actually engage and think about them, you have to switch between domains. Okay? That's why there's no such thing as multitasking. So if you're counting soup, can you be concerned about the person next to you? No, because you're counting the soup, okay? So I'd like for you to consider what it would look like to have principles. Now, yes, I'm going to give you some rules, okay? But consider the principles that are the origin of the rules. What's behind it? How this came about when I first proposed the class is I was in the beginning of my PhD program and I had to teach a class. And I had just finished my undergraduate degrees in art history and American studies, switching to counseling psychology. There were these lovely things called statistics. I had no clue, never took a stats class in my life. All I knew about psychology was Freud. Seriously, ladies and gentlemen. I'm still shocked to this day that they let me in the program. I'm just like, bad day, right? Okay. And so I had all these stats classes. I'm like, I'm not teaching stats. So what can I do? I had been giving these lectures after we returned from Sweden to the law school and the business school. And I thought, I wonder if there is precedence for doing an etiquette class. So I started doing research, and this is about 15 years ago, and found out MIT, University of Brilliance, right? They were actually concerned because their students were not getting hired as quickly or as easily as they thought. So they asked employers to talk about their students. And the results of those studies were three things. First of all, their students were brilliant. No surprise there, right? Duh, it's MIT, okay? Secondly, your students work really well in groups. That's why you're always put in groups, is because that's an important part of professionalism, okay? Third thing, your students have no social skills. Seriously, that was what came back. So they started giving classes and workshops in etiquette so that their students would be well prepared with their soft skills and social skills. With that, Harvard, which is geographically close to MIT, they find out that MIT has classes and they're upset because now they've got an advantage that Harvard doesn't have. So Harvard starts them. Then it just moves down the East Coast, up the West Coast, and of course makes its way to Brigham Young University, right? Now, even further is just last year, 2017, David Deming, who wrote for the Harvard Business Review, huge article, both qualitative and quantitative study about what is going to make the difference in the 21st century for hires. It's not STEM. It's your soft skills, your social skills. So this stuff matters, ladies and gentlemen. And not just for you, but for those that you're going to be taking care of. So here, the Queen. Do you get the play on words? A tale to remember, okay? Please say you get that. You're college students, okay? So going on, now that I've tempted you so long with those donuts, all right, let's talk about a few rules. But remember, the rule for guiding your mealtime etiquette is it's the person, not the plate. I'll give you some general rules. And first of all, let's begin napkins and pinkies. Immediately when you sit down, you can put your napkin on your lap, wherever you're at, okay? So napkin goes on your lap. Anyone have any idea? This is actually a luncheon napkin that you have. A dinner napkin is larger, and a cocktail napkin is smaller. Why different sizes?
Is it to let you know how much food to expect?
Yeah, how much food to expect or how much food is actually served, right? Cocktails are fewer food, lunch is less, and dinner's going to be larger, so you're going to need a larger napkin. Most of etiquette has its origins in common sense, okay? Who's ever heard that it was good etiquette to hold your pinky out? That meant that you were very classy, right? From the upper crust, as it were. Actually, no, because anything in etiquette that calls attention to yourself is not practicing good etiquette. Remember, it's about others, right? How this came about, though, is china and crystal were developed about the time of the Crusades. So you have all these burly warriors coming back, all right? They walk into the palace for dinner, they grab the crystal, and what's happening? Major breakage, right? Okay, so they're taught to grab it with 3 fingers instead of all things. Saves the crystal, right? That's where, so you just hold it with 3 fingers instead of all 4. Just let your finger drop down. Now, what about drinks? Now, remember that you don't call attention to yourself. If you're at a table and there are 5 wine glasses, are you going to turn them all upside down?
No. First one probably.
Why? No, why?
Oh, I wasn't answering. I was thinking about something else.
So yeah, well, to be honest with you, no, that's perfectly fine. This calls attention to yourself, right? The host or hostess or the company didn't know that you didn't drink. So your glass stays over, and when the wine is served, all you have to do is say no thank you, right? Just no thank you. What if by chance you're talking and the wine is served in your glass? Do you have to drink it? No thank you, okay? You might feel bad because it could be expensive, but other than that, just no thank you, all right? Doesn't have to be the issue. Then outside in, here we go. So remember back to the Crusaders? First utensil to show up is actually the knife. So it goes in your right hand, ladies and gentlemen. Who in this room has ever eaten with chopsticks? Great. Yeah, that's questionable if it's rather eating or not. So remember she said in the video, you must always eat with the back of your fork and knife? Not true. Because if you're so uncomfortable eating with the back of your fork and knife that you can't talk to others around you, is that good etiquette? No. But it's nice to know how to do both ways, right? So you're going to take your knife and put it in your right hand. By the way, etiquette only accommodates left-handed people by having them sit at the end of the table. And I've got 2 left-handed people in my family, so I know I can feel your pain, okay? So knife, the blade faces you, all right? It would be, if you were setting it, it would be on the right-hand side of the plate, because they would actually use their knives and stab the food. You would put the blade in, because if you put the blade out, it would take out the guy next to you. It was aggressive, all right? So knife in the right hand with the blade facing you, pointer on the back. Everybody, knife's up. Then the fork, same thing. Pointer on the back of the fork with the scoop side towards you. And we're going to do what's called European, or eating with the back of your fork and knife first. So you're going to take, and with your donut, you're going to cut a piece of your donut and stab it with your fork. All right? And then just simply lift it to your mouth. You don't have to do chicken wings. Just drop your shoulders, relax, and lift. Everybody try it. And if you don't eat gluten, just pretend you're eating it, okay? So that is eating with the back of your fork and knife, all right? Now, the second way starts off about the same. When you're eating European, you can rest your hands on the table, but you mostly have your utensils in your hands, okay? If you're eating peas and rice, you're gonna slow it down and push them onto here and then lift, okay? European does slow the meal down. It gives you time to visit because you can't scoop food so you don't have as large a bite, okay? Now, American, we come along, same way. Knife in the right hand, fork in the left hand, all right? When you are eating American, you can cut up to 3 bites at a time. So you can cut 3 pieces of your donut, okay? And then what you're gonna do is you're gonna take your knife and pretend this is a clock. Here's 12 and here's 6, 3 and 9. And you're gonna take your knife and kind of put it between 11 and 1 with the blade in. And you're gonna put it down on the plate. Then you switch your fork over into your right hand. It balances on your 3rd finger, see that? And just close. You don't hold it like a shovel, okay? So just on your 3rd finger, balance, close. You can eat those 3 bites, okay? Preferably 1 at a time, okay? And then you would put your fork back in your hand and your knife back here, and you can again cut 3 pieces. All right, so now you know, eating with the back of your fork and knife, or European or American. You can use either way, whatever's most comfortable to you. What we do at our house is usually on Sundays we eat European, just so if I'm with a group of people and I feel like I want to eat that way, I can. Now what you can't do, ladies and gentlemen, is switch during the meal, okay? Because what happens is there's kind of a rhythm or a choreography that gets started when people start eating, and if you switch it up, that's when accidents start happening, because you disrupt the rhythm. So commit to one way and just eat it that way, okay? So fork and knife. Now, 3-bite rule. This is my payoff for teaching these. I will not charge you $200 for the 2 hours, okay? Everyone, eyes up here. From this day forward, you will eat 3 bites of everything that is served to you, unless you really will die if you eat it, okay? Because it's not polite to die during dinner, right? Okay. Why? Why eat 3 bites of food?
3rd one's the charm.
Pardon?
3rd one's the charm.
It's a
3rd one's the charm.
Yeah, 3 times the charm, yeah. You have a little bit of charm, a good deja vu, fate going for you. I would submit, yes, go ahead.
Are you saying you eat at least 3 bites?
Uh-huh. Well, you can get to know the food that way, right? You learn about people when you eat their food. We were in the Indian embassy, and my husband hands this little black thing to me, and he's like, "Oh, you have to eat this. It tastes just like India." Sure. I put it in my mouth. 3 days, my mouth burned. I was so unhappy with him. And when you go to India, it is this incredible sight, sound, smell, sensory overload. It's just this intense sensory experience. It's 3 days of intensity. It's just incredibly, wonderfully whelming. What about your neighbor's spaghetti? It tastes different than yours. You learn something, right? And you say, well, what if I don't like the food? Well, I'm not real fond of beans of any type except for green beans, okay? We're at a dinner. this very large platter of lima beans starts coming. And my husband, because you rarely get to sit with your husband when you're, or your spouse when you're at dinners, he looks at me like, haha, how are you gonna handle this? You know, because here's this steaming platter of lima beans. I'm like, oh dear. So I take a small portion of lima beans, put it on my plate, look at those lima beans, put it in my mouth and drank water and swallowed them whole, and I'm still alive today, okay? So what does that do? Keep your water close by. We were at a dinner with one of my husband's business associates in Hong Kong, and he said, I want your children to have a really, really wonderful Asian meal. So we're going to go this 14-course dinner. So he takes, and at that time our children were 14 down to 6, okay, so young. Our 12-year-old daughter was seated on the host's right. And if you know Asian food, it looks really different to Westerners. It looks different. The textures are different. The smells are different. And yet, my children got through that meal. In fact, so much so that the host the next morning, he was talking to my husband, he said, your children were amazing. They ate something of everything. And he said, it was curious though. They drank about $300 worth of Sprite. Because what were they doing? Drinking, right? So yeah, I would plead with you, please start now at home trying to eat those things that you just don't like, because there will be opportunities for you to eat things and learn things about people. And it's the person, not the plate. Also, if you're out at a business dinner and they've taken you out to lunch, how do you know what to order? How about simply asking, what would you recommend? Then they say, oh, the chicken, I think I'm gonna have the chicken, but the lobster here is fabulous. What does that tell you? Can you eat the lobster? Absolutely. Does that mean you have to order the chicken? No, that shows no autonomy of thought or courage to ask a question, right? When everybody at the table orders chicken, or that you order the least expensive thing on the menu. Now, if you want to, if that's what you want, that's fine, but have the courage to ask the questions. Also, if you don't know how to eat something, please ask. We were at our first year in Sweden, they call it the crayfish festival or crawfish festival, and they look like baby lobsters, and I love lobster, so immediately I think, oh, lobster bake, okay? So I'm sitting there eating these little crayfish like crazy, and I ate 27 of them. It was the first of 8 courses. Yeah, okay. I so wished I had asked, just simply asked, tell me about this. What is this for? How do you do this? You know, they would have shared. I have never had anyone offended when I have asked about how to eat something or do something. In fact, I'm going to show you a clip, and I want you to watch what's going on. And yes, I own the edited version of this, and it's been approved, okay?
It didn't fit. Oh, no. Got a problem. All right, Miss Vivian, one more time. Dinner napkin.
Dinner napkin. Lay gently in the lap.
Good. Elbows off the table. Don't slouch. Shrimp fork. Salad fork. Dinner fork.
I definitely have the salad fork. The rest of the silverware is a little confusing.
If you get nervous, just count the time. 4 times dinner fork. Sometimes there are 3 times the salad fork. Sometimes. Upstairs to the right.
Excuse me.
Shall I order for you?
Yeah. Please do so. Thank you.
I'll do that. Mr. Lewis, my grandfather believes the man who created a company should control its destiny.
Where's the salad?
The salad comes at the end of the meal.
That's the fork I have.
Put it another way, between your public statements and the rumors flying around on this, I find it very hard to figure out what your real intentions are.
I don't know about you, but I've never been able to figure which goes with what.
You know, there was a time when we built ships the size of cities, and like my grandfather made this country.
Who ordered this?
The gentleman did that. Bon appetit.
He said escargot. It's
French for snails. It's a delicacy, try it. David?
Mr. Lewis, if you were to get control, and I don't think you will, but if you did, what do you plan to do with the company?
Break it up and sell off the pieces? I'm sure you understand I'm not thrilled with the idea of your turning 40 years of my work into your garage sale.
At the price I'm paying for this stock, Mr. Morse, you are going to be a very rich man.
I'm rich enough. I just want to head my shipyard.
Slippery little suckers.
It happens all the time.
Okay, so first of all, some of the best etiquette that I've ever seen practiced in that. In fact, that gray-haired gentleman is one of my 5 crushes, you know, like with Benedict Cumberbatch, Adam Levine, Denzel Washington, you know, okay. You're allowed, okay? Yeah, what a wonderfully kind man. And some of the worst etiquette, you know, Richard Gere, kind of that class separation. But what did you feel? Did she contribute anything to the conversation? She was trying to count times and remember all these tricks that are great, but if you're trying to remember tricks, you're not going to be able to be present in the meal. On your silverware, just work from the outside in and you will be right 97% of the time, and live with the 3% that you're not. Somebody will get you another fork. It's happened, okay? Yeah, I have found so far in research 17 different kinds of forks. How will you know? You don't. But working from the outside in does it every time. Also, the great dinner debate. Would you mind coming? Are you right or left-handed?
Either way.
It would be right-handed today, okay? So, yeah, I had a streak where I was getting lefties, and it doesn't quite present the same way. If you would take a seat. Now, actually, in the most formal dinners, food is served on a platter. So at the royal palaces, and you would use this fork and knife, or fork and spoon, and serve yourself a portion onto your plate, okay? And your name, please?
Austin.
Austin. So a favorite food, please?
Oh, donuts.
Donuts. Okay. I'll remember that at the end. Okay.
Or steak. Or
okay, steak. Okay, so we'll have some beautiful fillets here, all right? So Austin is going to take a portion of steak and put it on the pretend table with the pretend plate using the fork and the spoon, okay? So one in each hand, perfect. And serve yourself, perfect. There you go. Great, back in the, well done, thank you. Everybody watch that, okay? Now, Austin, may I serve you some steak?
Oh, yes.
Okay, forking. Which way was more comfortable?
Oh, this side.
Yes. Otherwise, he has Tyrannosaurus Rex arms, right? Okay, so if you'll stay there for just a second. Yes, this is the great dinner debate. Food gets passed counterclockwise around the table, and it's served on the left and taken from the right. The reason being that most of us are right-handed, and that's your strong hand. You can take the bowl, you can take the utensils and pass it around, except for beverages. So if I were serving from the left across Austin, because the glasses are always above your hand on the right, is that better? Or is this better?
Second one.
Yes. So beverages get served on the right. Thank you so much. So yeah, so when Thanksgiving dinner comes in just a few weeks, you know which way to pass the food, okay? Counterclockwise. Finally, hosting 101. What happens when you're in the company and you get to invite someone to dinner? How many of you have had that date question, where would you like to go to dinner? Oh, I don't care, right? And they're like, she doesn't care, we're going to Wendy's, right? I don't care gets you nothing. Let's start a conversation, okay? I was thinking we could go to Wendy's or McDonald's or Chick-fil-A. Oh, really? I was thinking Sundance would be a lovely option, right? No. You start the conversation, right, by giving options so that they know a price range. They know kind of what type of, if it's formal or casual, but please, give options, and the person who gives the options doesn't have to make the choice. It's the other person. So you can start practicing this. Now, whether you're out on dates or married, right? Come Friday night, what video would you like to watch? I don't care. So you watch Independence Day. He should have known I wanted to watch Emma, right? Nobody is a mind reader. So just articulate your choices and give people options and let them choose and start a conversation. Please go ahead and eat your donuts. And by the way, your donuts are finger food. You can eat them with your fingers most of the time. Which brings me to a couple things. There are some plants that they use. First of all, you might see this. It's filled with water, might have a lemon on the outside, or little flowers. Anybody know what it is during dinner? It's a finger bowl. Now, if you have not used your fingers, you don't have to put them in the water and dry them on your napkin. If you have, then you would. Now, you don't bathe in public, right? So just put your fingers in lightly and dry them on your napkin. Second plant, because employers are wanting to see, can he sit back or can she sit back and watch? Do they have the courage to ask a question if they cannot determine what this looks like? This comes about a third of the way through the dinner oftentimes. It's filled with cold sherbet. Anybody know what it is? Palate cleanser. Yes, usually you've had something sauced or spicy, and this is to re-cleanse your palate so you can taste the food next. This is not dessert, and of course you would never make noise with your, right, because it calls attention to you, right? So you'd eat quietly. Finally, on soup. Do you remember our dear friend 1, 2, 3, for heaven's sakes, okay? Or you have like 7 ships, there's all these different rules. Let me just show you. Pretend that you have a borrowed tie on that's worth $5,000, and Irma's original, okay? Borrowed, mind you. Which way are you going to eat your soup? Here's the first way. Second way. Which way?
Second way.
Why?
So you don't get a straw.
Yeah, it goes drip, 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 eat, right? Instead of drip, okay? So just push the soup away because it will save your clothing, all right? It's just common sense. Now, I always love this slide because everyone thinks they start laughing at something in the other etiquette video. And this principle is especially meaningful to me because I'm actually a real introvert. When I go home tonight, I will literally, there's a new Brandon Sanderson book that just came out. I'm going home to read it tonight, okay? So, no, but I love what I talk about, and I'm passionate, and I know the difference that etiquette can make in your lives. And so I come and I talk about it. My husband had just been appointed the Assistant Secretary of State over 96 international organizations like the UN, World Health Organization, UNESCO. He had offices in 8 countries. After his appointment, I was asked to the Vice President's house, and all the spouses of all the ambassadors in Washington were going to be there. The Vice President's house. I walk up there, drive our station wagon, park, huge white tent out there, and I walk into the tent and see this mass of humanity. And I'm like, I'll just turn around and go, nobody will know, right? And literally, as I'm turning around, up comes Mrs. Bush, Sr. And she says, Candlin, you're new. Let me introduce you to some people. And then she takes me around and introduces me to 5 different people, makes sure that I'm visiting with someone, and then takes care of her other guests. Such a rich principle, ladies and gentlemen. When you're in those situations of large masses, or you're at the Cougarite just sitting, I can always guarantee there will be someone who's more uncomfortable than you are. So now when I walk into those crowds, take a deep breath and look for someone. How does that work in business? You go to those huge receptions, say Bain, Mitt Romney's old company, okay? They have everybody coming and everybody wants to visit with the president, right? So 40 people around the president, but you did your homework. You looked up everyone who's going to be there from Bain, and you see over there, because you have this thing called the internet with pictures, right? Lovely thing, okay? And you say, oh, there's the CFO, and he's back against the wall not talking to anyone. I identify, introvert, right? You go, Mr. Peterson, it's so nice to see you. And you have a great conversation with him. Who gets remembered the next day when they're talking about, did anyone meet any interesting students last night? Is it going to be the mass of 40 or the one who looked for the one? Now with that, there are some rules that we have to implement. We have this lovely thing in our culture called missionaries. And they're like, hi, how are you? Hi, how are you? And they're adorable. They have get out of jail free cards for all the mistakes that they make in cultures, okay? But there's actually a precedence for how you should handshake. And listen carefully, ladies and gentlemen. So if someone outranks you, they have more rank than you do, you wait for them to extend their hand. If that's equal, If someone is older than you, you wait for them to extend their hand. If you both have the same rank and you're both about the same age, and it's a woman and a man, you wait for the woman to extend her hand. It's basically origins and safety issues, okay? So, what does that look like? You say, well, no, I have to shake my hand to seal the deal or to show power. No. Handshakes were a show of trust and confidence in the relationship. Would you please come up? And what is your name?
I'm Tanner.
Pardon?
Tanner.
Tanner, and last name Tanner?
Ave.
Pardon?
Ave.
Ave. Yes. Okay, so Tanner has just been promoted to be the president of Bain, okay? Well done, Tanner. All right. Does Tanner outrank me? Yes, I'm a lowly little professor, okay? So what does this look like? Tanner, I'm gonna approach you and do not shake my hand, okay? So, hello, Dave, right?
Ave.
Ave, okay, try this again. Hello, Mr. Ave, Candle and Newell, how are you?
I'm good, how are you?
I'm well, thank you. Were you able to accompany your company when they went down to North Africa to the orphanages?
I was.
How was that?
It was great.
Fantastic. Yeah. Okay, do you see how, that did not look weird, right? Now this time, shake my hand, okay? Okay, so Mr. Ave, Candle and Newell, how are you?
I'm good, how are you?
I'm wonderful, thank you. Were you able to, okay, thank you so much, Tanner, appreciate that. So what does that look like, ladies and gentlemen? You have 30 seconds to shake 3 hands. Go, stand up, move, okay? Go, it wakes you up too. Hi, Candle and Newell, how are you? Good, and what is your name?
Chelsea.
Chelsea, it's nice to see you. Thank you for coming. Thank you. Okay, you're welcome. Thank you. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats. Now that exercise usually generates a question or two. Anyone have any questions?
How do you compare ranks on rooms full of people who...
Well, ranks you should basically know before you go, okay? You should be aware of who's who. There is that lovely thing called the internet, okay? So do your homework, ladies and gentlemen. If you want to do well, you have to practice and do homework. Yes?
Are most people in the business world aware of that rule?
Most are, yes. Some aren't, and that's okay too. And if you're feeling it's uncomfortable in some ways, it's okay to shake. You know, remember these are rules, but the principle is look for the one, make other people feel comfortable. So you wouldn't go up and say, I'm 61, are you 62? I mean, yeah, no, you wouldn't do those things, right? You know, do you outrank me? I'm, 37th in the, book of who's who. You're 38. No, you wouldn't do those types of things. So you kind of now you have the rule, apply the principle too, okay? With that takes us to feast and famine. That is actually one of the things she was right on. When you do go to events, you usually aren't there to eat. What are you doing? Talking and having conversations, right? And in fact, there's just a really simple way to handle it is you would take, and in your left hand, you would put a napkin with a plate, you'd put food on it, you'd have your glass, you can balance it, you can drink your glass with your right hand, and your right hand is still free to do what? Shake hands, okay? So that's how you would negotiate a cocktail evening, all right? So yeah, that feast and famine, seriously, we would go to 14-course dinners and come home and eat Cheerios in the kitchen because we were so hungry, because we were talking and creating relationships. That's what was important. Sorry, I don't have a clicker. Now, what about networking? What is networking? What's your understanding of networking?
It's a way to introduce yourself to people who you might be able to help or who may be able to help you later.
Yes. And let's sit in that first space. It's a way to introduce yourself to others and create a relationship. It's not concerned about what they can do for you. In fact, it is a little bit more what can you do for them. It's just creating relationships. You are networking all the time. You do it on Sunday, right? Especially if you look for the one who's sitting all by themselves on a bench and you go over and look for the one. You can practice your handshaking at church. In fact, when you go to your home wards, check out the little old ladies on the back row, and they will be floored and amazed that you know the handshaking rules, okay? I'll be, oh my gosh, he didn't, he's not a missionary anymore. She's learned how to shake hands the right way. And it may be that they won't even shake your hand, and that's okay. Now, what is this? How many people have been to a sporting event in the past month? Raise your hands, own your lives. How many of you have been to the museum in the past month? Couple, good. I would like to suggest that you go to everything this campus has to offer that you can. If you're sporty, do arty things. If you're arty, go to sporty things. Get out of your comfort zone and learn. That's networking. That's living life in a rich way. Anyone want to guess what that painting's name is?
Discomfort.
It's called Boogie Woogie Broadway, okay? And you all shake your head, oh, I can see it, right? All you had to do was ask and be interested in what the painting was. I'll never forget, about 8 years ago, I was teaching a group of third graders humanities for an academic year. And we went through and taught all, art and architecture and dance and music. And I showed them, I said, Mikhail Baryshnikov, the dancer there, has a higher vertical than Michael Jordan. And these little boys are, And I'm like, So we go back and I show them Swan Lake. And they're all like, yep, has a higher vertical than Michael Jordan. End of the year, I had permission from their parents to do little videotape interviews to see what their experiences were, kind of a qualitative study. And I'll never forget, there was a little boy, and I was asking, I said, what was your favorite part of humanities? Swan Lake. I said, I beg your pardon? Swan Lake. I beg your pardon? Oh, Swan Lake, because it made me feel good inside. Ladies and gentlemen, that's what you're looking for. Is be aware of the world around you, live in it, participate. That's what networking is. And it's amazing how many times you'll be surprised at what you find. So the workplace, when you finally get that job, make sure that every person you interact with feels valued and valuable, that they know that they can contribute. There's this wonderful thing, if we think about the scriptures, we're supposed to love our neighbors as ourselves. Remember the good part about loving our neighbors, right? But we have to get comfortable in our own skins. Ladies and gentlemen, humility isn't thinking less of yourself. It's thinking about yourself less. So being confident, recognizing you've been given talents and abilities to serve and to work in the workplace and recognize those around you. Remember that on time is late. Thank you, Elder McConkey. Why? Be 5 minutes early so you can gather your wits. Today we had problems with tables and chairs, but because we were all early, it started on time. You have the time to get present. You're not rushed, and you can be aware of the one. You have the opportunity to look for the one. So today, choose to be on time, which is 5 minutes early. I'll never forget in the mission field, and I can attest because I have worked for decades on this. And finally, when we're in the mission field, I decided I'm not going to be late anymore. I've had it. So I was online, on time, getting there early. And one time, my husband calls me, he says, honey, where are you? And I'm like, I'm stuck in a traffic jam. And it was so lovely to not be lying, right? To be honestly stuck in a traffic jam, not trying to make something up because I was late. There's just this wonderful freedom that comes with choosing to be on time. Secondly, if you have something to say in the workplace, please write it down and give it to someone. Do not ambush them in the hallway and say, would you do this and this and this and this? You've basically downloaded your agenda, and that's not appropriate. You can send them an email so they can remember it. They shouldn't have to be writing on their hand what's been asked to do. Also, who's ever been in a meeting that lasted 2 hours that could have lasted 45 minutes? Everybody. We all kind of think we're funnier than we are, okay? So we tell jokes and we say, and that's okay, but it's probably not appropriate during meetings. Everyone loves to have a meeting end early, right? You're just like, best thing ever. I just picked up 10 minutes, okay? So make sure when you're participating in the meeting that you're actually contributing and you're not just entertaining. Stay on target. Leave things better than you found them. You can start this right today. When you go into the men's room or ladies' room, just after you've washed your hands, wipe around the sink for someone you will never see, but you've left it better for them. It's this ability to start looking outward. That's practicing good etiquette, because you value the people who you work with. Clean up the sink around you. Make sure that you're talking positive. We don't do the gossip soup. It stops with you. You hear something negative, it never gets passed around. I have no tolerance, and neither does the Savior. And finally, the book bag of today is the office of tomorrow, ladies and gentlemen. So what does yours look like? You're not suddenly going to start living in this beautiful, clean office if your book bag isn't reflective. And in fact, I was on a panel 8 weeks ago with employers on hiring, talking about hiring practices, and they said they've actually started going out to people's cars during the interview and looking at how their cars were taken care of. Why? Isn't that terrifying? Thoughts? Why? Yes.
Shows either pride in your life or negligence.
Yeah, consistency. Maybe you're dressed really nice, but you don't have consistency with the way you care for your car. They're not looking at make and model. You could have a student car totally, but how do you care for the things that you have responsibility for? Because you might look great, but is it consistent across domains? And then finally, Forbes study just, now it's been 9 months ago, they did a workplace study. People said, you know how there's always that person in the office that you just don't get along with? So they challenged that person, or the person who didn't like that person, to do one kind thing for them anonymously for 30 days. Guess what the results were? Significantly so. Not perfect. That person had changed. It was amazing. They became the nicest person. It's true. We love the people we serve. So everyone in the workplace should feel valued and valuable. And it begins, ladies and gentlemen, with a name.
Yung kasing guard dito sa condominium namin, boss ang tawag sa akin, nakakatuwa lang siya araw-araw, wala siyang mintes na bumabati sa akin. Meron isang beses galing sa gimikan, so parang napainom. Hindi ko na alam kung paano pa ako nakaakyat. Siya pa na yung nagagad sa akin.
So alam mo pangalan niya?
So ladies and gentlemen, the power in the workplace of remembering people's names. Secondly, art of communication. You have phones, which are great blessings to your life, and they're not as important as the person in front of you. You're in the Cougar Eat checkout line, your phone rings, what do? Pardon? Yeah, you have this lovely thing called memory, right? You can look at recents and see who called. The most important person is the one who's living in front of you. Science now shows you have what's called parasocial relationships, and they're not rewarding. This is where they think a lot of the depression and anxiety are contributing to the mental health crisis here in universities right now, because they're not real relationships. They're relationships, but they're not with real people necessarily. Also, ladies and gentlemen, sorry, you're going to hate me for this one. 3 texts in a row is a conversation. Pick up the phone and call. You're forgetting how to talk to each other. I am too. Texting is such a lovely thing. And remember what it's like to actually talk to one another. Email, she was right. Start your emails with Dear Mr. Johnson or Dear Dr. Johnson. Not like, hi, what's up? How you doing? Good morning. No, dear. It's always easier to become casual than to do casual and then try to be formal because they were unhappy. So you start that Dear Mr. Johnson or Dear Professor Johnson, all right? And then you write a simple email, sincerely, your name. Also, personal and business cards, I would really recommend that you get what's called a personal card. It's the size of a business card. All it has is your contact information on it, kind of like the header on your resume and cover letters, just your name, your Gmail, your phone number, and your LinkedIn, okay? So you're out and you're at that networking event to Mr. Peterson, and you can say, oh, thank you so much. Here's my personal card. This has been the last 3 semesters. People have gotten jobs because of this in my class, ladies and gentlemen. The first time it happened, I was shocked. In comes here and she says, you won't believe what happened. I was at a dinner, last week. I said, well, tell us. She said, no, personal cards. She said, I was talking, they had a mentor at every table. I was seated next to him. We were talking. The dinner ends. And I said, thank you so much. Here's my personal card. And he said, oh, well, thank you. Here's my business card. He gives it, and then she has his contact information. She emails him, Dear Mr. Johnson, thank you so much. I enjoyed our conversation, done. Sends that off. Then she sends a hard copy email, or a hard copy thank you note, okay? Sits down, writes it, because what? She has his contact information, right? So she sends that off. He gets that on Friday. The dinner was on Tuesday. He calls her up and he says, Sierra, I've never seen this attention to detail and concern for others. Let's find you a job. And that's happened 3 times. It's 3 points of contact, it's follow through, it's consideration, it's civility in the workplace. TED Talks off the charts now talking about civility in the workplace and why it's important. We need to treat each other like we matter. Also, if someone has spinach in their teeth, please tell them. Do they know? If they knew, they would take it out. So who's uncomfortable? Well, you're not, because you don't know, right? You're uncomfortable, right? So get over your own discomfort to help someone. Excuse me, your zipper's down. Now, you don't announce it to the whole world, right? Okay? But yeah, be helpful and kind and have the courage to get over your discomfort to help someone else. I remember crossing to go back into the parking lot in grad school parking, and there was this woman with these amazing shoes on in front of me. And I looked at them, I thought, oh, those are great shoes. I should say, no, don't say, no. 3 times I should say something. Finally, I tap her on the shoulder. I said, I'm sorry to disturb you, but your shoes are great. And she turns around and she goes, oh, thank you. I'm on my way to an interview. I said, great, good luck. I could have said nothing. I choose to think that I made a difference for good. So be generous with each other. Be kind. Make sure that we recognize what each other is doing well. And then RSVP. Does anybody know what that means in French, en français? Respondez-vous, s'il vous plaît, right? Means please respond. Anybody see who this is from? Anybody know who Peyton Manning is? Please, somebody. Okay. Yeah, okay. Big time quarterback, right? Somehow one of his fans tracks down his address and sends him a wedding invitation with an RSVP card in it. If Peyton Manning can send back the RSVP card, Can't you? Now, you can't tell me that fan doesn't have that on his wall, right? Framed in gold, okay? Yeah, exactly. So yes, RSVP means call and people let them know if you're coming or if you're not coming. Either way, preferably within 24 hours. Do it almost, if you can, as soon as you receive the invite. It's a consideration and it's a way of showing gratitude for being invited, whether or not you're able to go or not. I did them. So what does a thank you note look like when you're doing these things? It's pretty simple, ladies and gentlemen. Just the date. Dear Mr. Johnson, first sentence, thank you so much for our conversation during dinner. Second line, something specific. I really enjoyed our visit about the orphanages in North Africa, okay? Third line, a restatement of the first line. Thank you again for the visit. Sincerely. That's a manageable thank you note to write, right? You can do that. Now, when you write the hard copy thank you note, please make sure you do not repeat what you said in the email, right? I hope you can remember two things interesting about your conversation. So just send it off, be simple and sincere, and I can tell you it makes a difference for good. So dressing well is a form of good manners. This is also a favorite. Wake up in the morning, ladies and gentlemen, and look your best, and then walk out the door and forget about yourself. You feel good about yourself so you can forget. How many of you have ever had a hole in your sock and you're worried that someone's going to ask you to take off your shoe? Remember that mind? You cannot split your mind. Part of your mind is always over here, worried. Or how many missionaries, I know the trick of only ironing the front of your shirt, right? And you pray they don't ask you to take your jacket off, right? Because the sleeves, yeah, no, okay. Pay attention to those details and remember to feel good about yourself so you can just forget and concentrate on the people around you. Also, without moving anything except your heads, take a look around the room. Now, everybody, please sit up straight. Now, not only will your back thank you when you're as old as I am, okay? But if you are sitting up straight in the boardroom, you're perceived as being more intelligent, as well as in the classroom. You're also thought of as being more capable of making more money. Ladies and gentlemen, just from the way you sit. Also, everyone, please stand up. Okay, so our posture, remember, you can do two things. Our posture says so much about accessibility. Some people, she argued 85%, the most I've seen is 57%, okay? And that's in the research that I've looked at. What you want to do is stand tall, so pull your head like a little string is pulling out the top, drop your shoulders. First take them way up by your ears and drop them and roll them back. Then your hands just are at your sides, okay? We don't do Adam and Eve. That's a defensive posture. And you'll find people standing like this all the time, okay, with their hands crossed in front of them. That's not accessible or welcoming. So at your sides, if it's hard to handle at your sides, you can do what's called midlining, okay? It's still an open posture, but your hands are held at your waist, okay? Midline. I'll show. Midline. Okay, sorry. So this is midlining. I would encourage you to just get comfortable with your hands by your side. It's really such an open, inviting, powerful posture. Please take your seats. With that said, I'll never forget working with a gentleman on an interview, and he said, should I do this? I've heard it's powerful. And I'm like, oh, save yourself, save yourself. So be aware that this is real science, okay? And you want that accessibility. You're communicating so much. If you want to seem like you're communicating, you lean forward slightly. When you're in that interview chair or you're standing, you want to be seated up straight. And in fact, you don't want to sit all the way back in the chair in the interview because then you have to hoist yourself out, okay? So when you sit, you find the back of the chair with your leg, you sit and you're halfway in the chair, seated up straight, men and women, legs straight in front of you. Women can slightly tilt. You don't cross legs because it's defensive, all right? So just here, and then you have the ability to lean forward and use your hands, all right? So it makes a difference how you stand and how you dress. What does it tell an employer if you are nicely dressed out, a suit, tie, and your shoes aren't shined?
Low attention to detail.
Low attention to detail. What else? Poor time management. Didn't care. Okay. Poor planning. just from not having your shoes shine. And those impressions, ladies and gentlemen, first impressions, are made in 7 to 10 seconds. I'll never forget when I was out to Georgia to visit my grandsons. It was Halloween. We were going to the trunk or treat. We go out to this big farm area, and the very first person I meet is Wolverine, okay? Like fully decked out, you know, the tank top and the claws and the hair, you know. Guess who the bishop is the next day on the stand? I keep looking, Wolverine, no, that's the bishop, that one Wolverine. No, I couldn't get it out of my head because that first impression is so powerful. So please make sure you wake up in the morning and you feel good about yourself so you can forget about yourself. This is also an example of being a fashion victim. Ladies and gentlemen, I am wearing a zebra to the White House. Now, it was the 80s, a forgivable fashion period, right? Have the confidence to know what looks good on you. And make sure you feel good in it so that you're not distracted or that you're trying to be something you think looks good. So look at this.
Look, I can be a surf. Now, my whole house is great. I can do anything good. I like my school. I like anything. I like my dad. I like my cousins. I like my aunts. I like my cousins. I like my mom. I like my sisters. I like my dad. I like my hair. I like my haircuts. I like my pajamas. I like my stuff. I like my rooms. I like my whole house. My whole house is great. I can do anything good. Yeah.
So ladies, gentlemen, please get up in the morning, make sure that you remember dressing well is a form of good manners, and you can feel good about yourself so you can forget about yourself. Finally, especially in today's world, I was just on KSL talking about the importance of having civil conversations. Respect one another. Understand harmony. What's harmony made of? It's not one sound. Harmony comes from differences, different instruments. Harmony, a team, they all play different positions so they can succeed. But remember, the richness that comes from diversity. Respecting one another, having great, wonderful, intense conversations. But we're not here to make people feel small. We're here to edify and build up one another. In fact, in Ephesians, let no corrupt communication proceedeth out of your mouth, except that which edifieth. How do you build up the people around you? Through respect, listening. You have 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. It looks something like this.
Oh my God!
这个妈妈给我用筷子吃饭好啊，不要自己筷子。我要这样吃啊，怎么办？那是中国人，中国人都要用筷子。哎，好，吃到了吗？
I'm so very grateful for that simple little video clip because I never thought that it's hard for a little child in China. Difficult to learn to use chopsticks, right? And there's always room for someone else, always. A difference of opinion, to seek to learn, to not belittle, to respect, and to edify. Would someone read this for me, please? Yes.
Manners are a sensitive awareness of the feelings of others. If you have that awareness, you have good manners, no matter what fork you use.
And who's it written by?
Emily Post.
Do you recall who she is by chance? Anyone? Who's Emily Post?
She's the one who wrote the book.
She's the one who wrote the book. Remember the big book? And this is what she says etiquette is about. So not only was the mouse, but towards the end of our time in Sweden, I was invited to cut the ribbon to a big American exhibit, okay? So I was going into a very large department store, kind of like a Saks Fifth Avenue. And I was feeling really full of myself, you know, my new shoes and my best outfit, and the limousine drops me off. And I go walking into this large store, and I hear, Sister Newell, Sister Newell. And I was like, oh, because I knew exactly who it was. And there was a woman in our ward who was very, very modest, and probably what some would say not socially smooth. And my first instinct was to pretend I hadn't heard her. But I was so grateful because I did look, and like that, just a second, I saw who she really was. C.S. Lewis writes in The Weight of Glory that we live in a society of possible gods and goddesses. If we could see each other as we really are, we would be tempted to fall on our knees and worship one another. Ladies and gentlemen, other people matter. And the reality is that we are in this life together to get each other home. So I promise you, the best etiquette manual you will ever read off of that 3-foot-long shelf. Get up in the morning, say your prayers, read your scriptures, and the Holy Ghost will reveal the truth of all things to you, no matter what they are. And then remember, like Owen,
I feel.
Do you feel alive?
I feel happy of myself.
I feel happy of myself too. What do you got, any words of wisdom? What about for all the other kids trying to learn how to ride their bike? Can you say anything to them?
Everybody, I know you can believe in yourself. If you believe in yourself, you will know how to ride a bike. If you don't, you just keep practicing. You will get the hang of it, I know it. If you keep practicing, you will get the hang of it, and then you can get better and better at it as you do it.
Give me some thumbs up.
Thumbs up, everybody!
All right.
For rock and roll!
So ladies and gentlemen, thank you for spending the time with me, and just keep practicing. And I promise you, you'll get it. Thank you.